Hello, Education 1030 students. This week we're going to be working in Chapter 5. Now, before we get into Chapter 5, I wanted to recap what you were supposed to be doing in last week's lessons. So last week was all about your exam, your first exam 1 over Unit 1, and then you had to do your capstone. I have had several people that has completed the exam as well as taken the Unit 1 capstone. So if you haven't taken the exam and you haven't done the Unit 1 capstone, you need to email me or contact me so we can discuss this. This week, we're going to be looking in Chapter 5. So this week really is an important week. Just like I said, I really enjoyed Chapter 4. This week, I think you're going to get a lot out of the content because we're going to be going over how do you get the most out of class. When I ask you that, I'm wanting you to think about, how do you take notes? Are you an effective listener? Are you really getting the most? Are you participating? What do you do to prepare for class before your class actually starts? What are you doing after class? So these are the things that really make up the components of getting the most out of class. So it's all about engaging. Engagement strategies are really going to help you apply the content to what you're apply to the content. And if you apply through listening, participating, and note-taking, this is really going to help you to be able to not only engage with the content, but be able to retrieve it later when you need. So what I want us to look at is the first thing you need to do always is look at your learning resources or what I want you to do. So as I mentioned before, this first section, when you get into Chapter 5, is really going over an overview of what I expect you to have done this week. Okay, so remember, it opened on Friday, but it doesn't close until this Thursday, so you still have time to complete this. I would like you to read Chapter 5. You're going to complete the reading organizer. Now remember, the reading organizer is there to help you. It's like a study tool. It's an outline that helps you put the most important things down from Chapter 5. And then I have some PowerPoint slides that we're going to go through a little bit as well. I also have a video here for you that talks a little bit about how do you prepare for your lecture. So that means in class with your instructor. And then how do you take notes properly, and how do you go back and revise or look at those notes. So that video I would like you to watch. It's a short video. It's a YouTube video. It's really informative. I think it's a great video for you to watch. So just go ahead and look at that because it will give you study tips. And remember, all of this is really part about studying. How do you study well? So a lot of students misunderstand what studying means. They think it just means to look at your chapter or maybe take a few notes, maybe listen somewhat to what your instructor is saying. That's not really studying. And maybe that strategy worked for you in high school, but it's not going to work for you in college. I'm pretty sure by now this is our 5th week of content. Actually 6 weeks. We're in 6 weeks, but this is our 5th week because the first week was just orientation. After 6 weeks of school, you're finally realizing that college is a little bit different than high school. So you have to become more engaged, right? So remember, a lot of these courses that you're taking is heavy on the reading. You have to figure out, now that you know what learning style you are, you have to figure out how to take notes best and what strategies do you need based on your learning style to be able to engage with the content, to be able to remember, to be able to start writing notes. How do you prepare? What does that look like for you based on what type of learner you are? So these are things that we're really going to be looking at this week. For your assignment, before we get into the actual PowerPoint, there's going to be a discussion board for your assignment as well as your Chapter 5 quiz. I do want to remind you once again, you can take the quiz multiple times until it closes. It closes on March the 2nd, so please take advantage of that. So what you'll do for your assignment, you're going to watch another video. So this is going to be the best method of how you can take notes. So there's different methods of note taking. You're going to see that when you're reading chapter 5 and when we go through the PowerPoint. But this discussion board is really going to let you reflect on how you take notes in class and which is the best method. And it talks about 5 of them. There's more than 5, but it talks about 5 methods. And then what you'll do is you'll click on the discussion board. So after you watch the video, you're going to respond to this prompt. Which note-taking method is best for your learning style? So again, you're going to have to go back and connect to chapter 4 now that you know your learning style. So which note-taking method is best for your learning style? And please include your learning style from chapter 4 and how that learning style relates to the note-taking style that you think works best for you. Okay, so basically what I'm wanting you to do is to watch the video, think about what learning style you have based on chapter 4. You're going to write about what your learning style is, what note-taking method is best for you based on that learning style. That's what I want you to respond to. There is a chapter discussion board rubric. Always look at that to make sure you'll see how I'm going to grade you and that you understand what's expected of you. Excuse me. And then we have, don't forget to respond to at least 2 other students. Okay, so you don't have to respond to everyone, but I do want you to pick 2 students, 2 of your peers, and respond to them. And remember, try to make it where you add something to the discussion. Don't just put good job or I agree with you or that was my method too. Try to add a little bit more to the discussion like if you were in class. Okay, I see some people have already started to post. So let's go ahead and go back into chapter 5 because I want to talk a little bit about the PowerPoints and go over some things in there that I feel is important and draw your attention to the textbook as well. So I'm going to put this in PowerPoint mode. So when we're trying to get the most out of class, I want you to think about what that looks like for you based on what type of learning. So when we're talking about learning, we're going back to chapter 4. We're looking at kinesthetic. That means you're hands-on. We're looking at reading and writing, right? So you're a read-write learner. Or you may be oral, where you listen and lectures are your friend because that is how you learn best. Or we might have a visual learner, right? Charts, graphs, videos, any kind of visual images that really help you engage with the content a little bit more. So you have to realize when you're trying to get the most out of the class, what are we trying to do? We are trying to not only engage with the content, but we're trying to make connections. How does this apply to me? Why is this relevant? You can't do that unless you're engaging in learning. So what you have to do is you have to participate. You have to be an active learner. You're an active learner when you're engaged in class and in the content and you're participating in class. So this can look different for many people. So you could participate with active learner by doing the following that it lists here. Okay, some of these you're going to notice that you've seen these in chapters, in prior chapters, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So think about working with others. Improve your thinking, listening, and writing and speaking skills. Teaching yourself your best methods that works for you. Figuring out what works for you, how to be independent, how to study, how to ask for help. That's called functioning independently, figuring out what you need. Managing your time, that was something that we went over in chapter 3. And then gaining sensitivity to cultural differences. So what we're talking about here is really talking about thinking on how everyone comes from a different background, different ethnic, different home life. And what happens is that we're all different and we come to college in this big melting pot of differences and we have to start to learn from one another and other people's views and viewpoints and engage with that. So that's what we're talking about when we say gain sensitivity. So when we're talking about preparing for class, I want you to think about what does that look like? Well, when you're preparing for class, believe it or not, you do it day 1. That's where you look at the course syllabus, see what kind of assignments they have, how many quizzes you have. You're going to be looking at if there are any major assignments. Is there a lot of reading in this class? Is there a lot of hands-on? Is this a lab skill class? Think about what kind of studying you will have to do. How would you manage your time? You have to do the assigned reading. So it's really important for you to read before you go to class so that way you know and you're prepared and it's easier for you to try to make connections with the content. Try to always link things to your experiences. So what I mean by that is think about how will this apply to your life and experiences that you've had. That's where you're going to make those connections. You have to think about any kind of supplemental resources. That's any additional things that your instructor gives you. For instance, in our course, I give you videos that help you. So some people may be a visual and oral learner. This is going to help them because they get to watch the video that talks about the content. So think about if you're in a math class and your instructor assigns problems. So any additional materials they give you, do that because that's going to help you study even more. And warm up for class. What we mean by warm up is you're going to actually look over your notes from last class and do your reading. That's going to help you warm up so you can be prepared for class. And then get organized. A lot of students leave this out and they don't think that this is something that you do to prepare. You have to be organized. Now, if you are all digital and you don't have a notebook, one way you can get organized is organize your file, organize your notes that you type, put things where they go, make folders for different things in different chapters. If you do this, it's really going to help you be more productive. We talked a lot about organization in chapter 3. And then separate and label materials that actually goes along with getting organized. So whether you're a digital person or you like a notebook, you have to separate and label for the different classes you have. So when you're thinking about how do I become an active learner, if you went ahead and you were preparing for class, well, now that you're in class, now this doesn't matter if it's a lab skills or math, like a science class. It doesn't matter if it's an in-person class or a DVC where you go through Zoom or Teams to do your class. Even if you are a web class like ours, you have to participate. So participation is going to look different depending on what type of class you have and how it's delivered to you. You have to listen carefully, especially if you're in class. Talk about what you're learning through discussion boards or with your peers. Write about it. Connect it to your life and experiences that you've had. That's what we call active participation. So whenever we're talking about listening skills or listening actively, we want you to be more open-minded. So what does that look like? Well, it gave us some really neat tips on how can we open our mind and how can we become a better listener, something all of us need to work on. So are you sitting in front of the room? Are you ready for today's lecture? Focus on the main ideas, not just facts. This is where outlines can really help you when you're taking notes because you're picking out the most important facts and it's supporting details. Listen for any verbal cues. So if your professor repeats something often or their voice fluctuates or they say this is going to be on the test, those are things to look out for when you're taking notes in class. Listen for any new ideas. If you are an oral learner, repeat information to yourself in your head often. Keep an open mind. So that just means don't go to class with the attitude of, oh, I do not want to be here right now. I've got too many things going on, or sleeping or playing in your phone and not really being an active listener. A lot of students tend to kind of daydream or lose focus and start to think about other things in class. Try to get a handle on this if this is something that you do often, because just because you're there present with your body does not mean you're present with your mind. And then look at your notes. That's why we tell students, take notes. Always go back and look at them. Whether you write them handwritten or whether you type them, look and see if there are any gaps in your notes. Well, how are you going to know this? Well, one way is if you're talking to your peers and then you kind of looking at each other's notes and see if there's any gaps where you're missing a lot of information. If you don't want to work with a peer, one way you can figure out if there's a lot of gap in your notes is based on what you're reading and what the lecture is. And then maybe you can even ask your professor, just to make sure you're not missing something important. One thing students do is we never speak up. Whenever we're in class lectures, a lot of students are afraid to speak up because maybe they have questions or they are not really being an active participant. These are things that we need to kind of get over with our fear of, or work through our fear of public speaking, right? So if you don't understand something, ask the professor. If you don't want to ask in front of your peers, then ask them after class or you send them an email. If your professor is one that likes to call on people and you get called on, if you don't know, just say you don't know. Don't try to make something up, okay? That doesn't help you at all in that situation. And always make sure that you're bringing in your notes, you're bringing in stuff that's relevant to what you're learning that day. That's why it's important for you to prepare ahead of time. Another thing that students often forget to do is to bring your materials and then share your thoughts from your materials. A lot of students don't really come prepared, and they were not prepared to share thoughts. That's what I would like you to start doing or think about doing. So let's reflect. Are you choosing to take notes in class? Are you following these chapter tips that we've talked about and how to become a good note taker? So in chapter 5, if you want to see if you're engaged in learning, if you turn to page 105 in your textbooks, you're going to see table 5.1 that is going to let you see if you're an engaged learner. So this is a really nice activity to see how you respond, okay? So we went over the tips about being an engaged learner, and you're going to find those in your textbook on page 106. So on page 112 through 116, we're going to be talking about how do we take effective notes. So I talked to you already about, okay, we have effective note taking. That's what you want me to do, but what does that actually look like? Because maybe you've never taken notes before in high school. So there are 4 different ones we're going to talk about. Now I know that sounds kind of funny because the video that we talked about earlier said 5 note-taking methods, but we're only going to be covering 4 from this textbook. Remember, note-taking helps you understand and remember concepts and facts. There are 4 types we talk about: Cornell, outline, paragraph, and list. So on page 113, we have the Cornell format. This is actually one of the best known methods for taking notes. If you look on page 113 in figure 5.1, you're going to see kind of what a Cornell format looks like. So how we break this up is this is really going to help you if you have to recall stuff. So this is effective note taking for class. So if you'll look on page 113 in your textbook, you're going to have 2 columns. The left column is what we call the recall column, and the second column is where you're going to put down everything that you know, like your notes. So if you look on page 113, it's really going to let you take notes really well, because one column you're going to write down the concepts, right? Like, what are the 5 personality? You put 5 personality traits, name and describe them, and then you leave the right column blank, and then later you can go back and try to fill them in when you're in class or when you're reading. So this is really going to help you remember. This is actually a really good study tool too. So check that out. On page 114 is the outline format. The outline format is kind of similar to what I give you for your reading organizer. Essentially, it is a reading organizer. Those are really well to help you mark the main ideas and supporting details of the content. So if you look on page 114 in your textbook, in figure 5.2, it gives you an example of outlines. The next one is on page 115 and it's paragraph. Now, paragraph really is great if you're a read-write learner because it really helps sum up a large section of material. So say if you have a psychology class or if you have a history class where it's like mostly lecture, this is really good because it's going to allow you to write a large section of material. This is also a good study tool if you have an essay test or say English, you have a paper over a certain topic. This is really well because it's going to help you to summarize a lot of information and put it in your own words. So you can check that note-taking method out on page 115. The last one is page 116, and this is the list format. Now, list is really an informal outline, so it's an informal way to do an outline. What you're going to do is just list important information. Most of you probably are most familiar with this type of format for note-taking. You're just doing little bubbles or dashes and putting the most important information below. Okay, so growing up when I was taking notes, this was what I used most of all. I want you to think about what type of learner you are, watch that video, and see which one you think works best for you, which is really connecting to your discussion board. Another thing, and also I wanted to point out that PowerPoints have the different types in there for you to look at, as well as your book. So one thing to also think about is besides looking at the different types of note-taking strategies and what type of learner you are, you have to think about what type of class, because different note-taking techniques can be used for different types of courses or different learning environments. So if you're doing an online course, you're really going to have to do a lot of discussion boards, you're going to have to be more organized with your notes, and really you're going to have to do a lot of summarizing. What did I take away? What did I learn? What is the professor asking me to do? So that would really lend itself really well to the paragraph form. Then you look at and you also might want to use the outline, right? Then you think about non-lecture. So non-lecture courses are really courses that maybe are online completely, where they don't give you videos on the weekly, they don't give you what's going on, they don't walk through PowerPoints, everything is there, you do it. Or maybe it's a skill-based class, like maybe you have microbiology with lab, or human anatomy and physiology with lab, or it's a math course. Those are non-lecture courses. That's where you're going to have the information recorded for you, or there's not going to be any recorded information. So this is where you're going to have to really use lists to help you put the different types of main ideas or topics you're talking about. Here's again talking about the math and science courses. It really gives you some great ideas of how you can write notes with those types of courses. It's really going to be more about the equations, the formulas, the diagrams, the charts, the medical definitions. How does the instructor work the problem out? What's the formula? What symbols and abbreviations and notations did they use? Always use a pencil with these two types of courses so you can erase. And don't forget to use question marks, exclamation points, and asterisks to highlight important things. And usually with these types of courses, technology really helps you as well. The last thing I want to definitely tell you about is to review your notes. Some students will write notes and they'll participate in class, but they never go back and look at it. This is a shame because really it helps you. So there's something called the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve is where most forgetting takes place within 24 hours. So within a 24-hour period, you can lose up to 60% of the new information that you learned. So it's important for you to engage with the content. Well, how do you do that? You review your notes. What does it look like when you review your notes? Well, try these 3 strategies and see if you tell a difference. Write down the main ideas. You can do that using one of the note-taking methods or the outlines we talked about. Repeat your ideas out loud. This is important, especially if you're an oral learner. Review your notes from the previous class right before the next class. This is important. That goes under being prepared for class. Another thing students don't take advantage of is comparing your notes with someone else. This is going to help you get a good idea if you are missing anything in your notes, and to give you a chance to compare what you have to others and to see if you're agreeing on what the most important topics are that you're going to be tested on. Another thing is do the homework. A lot of students do not do the assigned readings or the assigned problems. This is so important. This is part of studying. You have to go back and review your notes. You have to do the assigned problems for math. You have to do the work skills labs whenever you have these science classes. These are things that we have to do to help us be a more active learner. Okay, so those are all the notes that I have for you. So I'm going to get out of this. So remember, this week you're going to, let's go back to chapter 5. You're going to read chapter 5, complete your reading organizer. So here's your reading organizer. I'm going to pull it up for you. Okay, so you're going to see here, this is just listing the most important topics and actually the main ideas and the supporting details that go along with it. This is really a great study tool for you, not only for quizzes, but for the exam. So right now, you've already had your first exam, so you know how you did. This is going to be a good indication for you if you haven't been using them. Hey, maybe I should start using these outlines. So they're provided there for you, so please take advantage of that. So once you've done the chapter 5 organizer and you've read the chapter and you've looked at the PowerPoint, I really want you to go through and watch those 2 videos. So one is just there as part of one of your learning resources. The other one is a part of your assignment. They're not very long. The second one that's part of your assignment is going back to what we talked about in the lecture discussion, looking at how to take notes in class and the 5 best methods. I want you to look at what type of learner you are, and I want you to look at which method would work for the type of learner you are. So when you click on the discussion board, the prompt is there for you. And then below is the rubric. So always try to look at the rubric twice. Look at it for the first time to see what I'm expecting, and the second time to make sure when you're completed the assignment or the discussion to make sure that you have everything that I asked you to put in there. And then respond to at least 2 other peers. That is all of chapter 5. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I am here. Also, just a reminder, if you missed the first exam and you didn't submit the capstone, you need to contact me so we can discuss this. All right, until next time, I'll see you then, guys. Take care and have a great week.